breaking down the latest on the Patriots receiving corps here on Pat's Cast.
It's the Vrabel era Pat's Cast in the fight. Mays got fire, Diggs takes flight. Stacking up wins, got the league on edge. From Foxborough turf to the road we play.
Welcome to Pat's Cast. I'm Brad Whitaker. We are in the off-season lull, right before training camp, which is just a few weeks away. But a lot could happen between now and late July with the Patriots and their receiving corps, and some of these players may be moved, some may be cut. A lot could happen, and the big storyline, of course, is what is going on with Stefon Diggs. We know he signed a 3-year, $69 million contract with $26 million guaranteed, but it's massively conditional. So conditional that even the guarantees are not guaranteed. All right, and we know it's been a rocky start so far for Stefon Diggs in New England. He missed most of OTAs. He was there in the beginning for the Vrabel speeches, missed a large chunk in the middle, was present at the end and into mandatory minicamp, of course. And, of course, during this time, he was seen twerking on a boat with an unknown substance. I don't think it was Diggs that was twerking. There were people twerking around him. He's with Cardi B. I don't know how that works. Might be an open relationship. It was an odd situation, and chances are, whatever that pink substance was, hopefully Diggs wasn't taking it, but he had it on hand. He was sharing it. NFL has nothing on him. The Patriots have nothing on him. There's no way to prove exactly what that was. I'm sure Diggs has had private conversations with Vrabel. Hopefully, he was transparent and honest through that, but as we heard from Mike Vrabel, he was asked the other day about, are you concerned with the dedication of Stefon Diggs? He kind of gave an answer saying, look, we want everyone to be here, talked about the whole team and talked about Diggs and how he's on kind of a different plan right now coming back from his ACL injury. But then he was asked a different question about Efton Chisholm, and the first word used by Mike Vrabel was dedicated, talking about Chisholm. So a little subtle shot there. I actually really enjoy Mike Vrabel's press conferences because, yeah, there is sort of that calm talking point delivery that he has at times, but he does have little nuggets in there, and it does seem to be a little shaky with Stefon Diggs right off the bat. But, Diggs looks in midseason form, at least from the videos that we've seen. Coming back from a torn ACL, he moves well, catches the ball well. Obviously, he's been a bit limited, but, he's on a different plan right now, trying to come back from his injury, and of course, we'll see what plan that looks like when training camp comes around. But the big thing that's going on here is the Patriots are yet to give him a physical, and they are essentially holding his contract hostage until that physical occurs. The reason, at least in my opinion, is Patriots do not want to make any commitments to this guy right now who's already been a slight distraction off the field. Diggs has been a distraction. I've said this many times. He's been a distraction at times on the field in other places, complaining about Josh Allen not throwing him the football enough in Buffalo. Similar story with the Minnesota Vikings. He was great last year in Houston, but got hurt early in the season, and that was it, so we didn't hear much there. He's been a distraction off the field so far this offseason, and it certainly raises the concern. Is he settling into sort of a late career complacency? Are we going to get the same Stefon Diggs in his 30s, coming off of an injury, knowing that he's in the final years of his career, as we've seen over the last, however many years, where he has been one of the best, if not the best at times, receiver in the NFL. And guess what? If Diggs doesn't pass his physical, Patriots owe him practically nothing. Of that $26 million that Stefon Diggs has guaranteed, it includes a $12 million signing bonus, which is spread over 3 years, but he doesn't get that money unless he passes his physical. Additionally, $10.6 million in guarantees is voided if the contract is terminated due to Diggs' pre-existing ACL injury. So, if he were to be cut by New England, they would only be on the hook for a little less than about $4 million that they've already paid him. So, Pats are seemingly kicking the physical can down the road just to make sure Diggs is a good fit. There's also a clause in his contract regarding illegal or immoral behavior. Again, impossible to prove what that pink substance was on the boat, but the Pats have reason to cut him if they want to. Now, if the boat thing were a big deal, I think he would have been cut right away, so I don't think that's going to be lingering, but it is a concern going forward. Are we going to see a repeat of this stuff off the field, particularly over the next few weeks before we get to training camp? And that's why the Patriots are doing this. They have all the leverage over Stefon Diggs right now, waiting on his physical until training camp, forcing Diggs to watch his off-the-field behavior and really making sure he's healthy and ready to go come late July. Now, could it backfire? It absolutely could, but that's really only if Diggs takes issue with the team, which internally I'm sure he is. I'm sure he's livid about this whole situation, but he has no incentive to speak out about it, right? Like, he goes to New England, he signs this contract that, all has to go right for him to get the near $70 million that he would have to make. He gets cut right away. Another team would pick him up, I'm sure. He's still a great receiver, but it raises a lot of red flags, and that's not something I think Stefon Diggs wants to deal with at this point in his career, knowing that he's not just on the back nine, he's probably on the back 4 or 5, and he did post on Instagram a couple days ago that he's trying to find a balance between family and work, but it seems like work is taking precedence over everything else. Now, some Patriots fans read this as, great, he's locked in, he's ready to go, work comes first. I kind of read it like he sounds like he's complaining a little bit. That's what I'm saying. I think Stefon Diggs internally is livid because he wants to have his physical now. He looks like he's ready to go on a different plan, obviously very limited, not participating in competitive drills during mandatory minicamp, but internally he's very upset about this. And this was kind of his way, I think, of saying, I got to work my tail off here just to get that money. And, he's rehabbing from a torn ACL, going to a new team that's holding tens of millions of dollars hostage until he passes his physical and fits Mike Vrabel's culture. I don't blame the Patriots for doing this, by the way, but you give Diggs his money right now, you could have the summer of Diggs on your hand, and then you have a whole bunch of other questions heading into training camp. He has millions more in his pocket, and then if you have to cut him then, before you even get to the regular season, he becomes a big distraction. That's another issue. Look, we all want it to work out with Diggs, and I think it probably will. I'm not that worried about it, but this is cause for concern. Can he become a distraction in a receiver room with a bunch of young guys? Absolutely. We've seen it before in the NFL. We've seen it across all of professional sports. We just saw it in Boston with Rafael Devers. Huge distraction in that locker room. Not willing to step up for the team, not willing to play first base, not willing to give up third base. Once he gave up third base, wasn't willing to go to first, wanted to stay at DH. Then, of course, he gets traded to San Francisco. I'm willing to do anything you ask me to do. You ask the Red Sox players, I know this is a Patriots podcast, but you ask the Red Sox players how they feel about Devers, at least what we've seen in recent interviews over the last couple of days. They seem to be happy that he's gone. And that's what the Patriots really need to avoid here, is Stefon Diggs becoming the Rafael Devers in that wide receiver room. And again, I don't think Diggs is necessarily that guy. I think his complaints are just about targets from his quarterback in the past, but you got a young quarterback, you got a bunch of young receivers, really only, I think, one or two veteran receivers in that room, in addition to Diggs. I don't know. I can see why the Patriots are very skeptical on this working out. I think he's already on thin ice, and hopefully we hear nothing about Stefon Diggs over the next few weeks. Comes in late July, passes his physical, gets to participate in team drills, in training camp, maybe play a little in the preseason, he's ready to go week 1. That is the perfect scenario. I think that's actually a likely scenario, but I don't know. Look, Diggs is one of my favorite receivers in the NFL to watch, and May needs all the help that he can get, especially with this receiving core. Josh McDaniels is going to help a lot, but he can't scheme around everything, and you need a little bit of talent there, especially in today's modern-day NFL, and having Stefon Diggs on that field unlocks so much for all the other receivers on this roster. So let's get to those other guys and whether or not I think they're going to make it and their current status on the Patriots roster. Let's start with Kyle Williams, who the Patriots drafted in the early rounds of this year's draft. Was up and down at times during the spring, but it's clear that the speed is there. There was a 50-50 ball with Christian Gonzalez that he ended up intercepting, and I talked about it on the last podcast. Then I saw the clip afterwards. That was not a 50-50 ball. It was a bad throw by Drake May. Kyle Williams had no chance at it, so I'm not going to knock him for that. But again, up and down at times, which is typical for a rookie, but really did have some highlight plays, even going up against some of the best Patriots corners, and we know the Patriots have a good defense, especially the DBs. Had some highlight plays throughout mandatory minicamp, got plenty of first-team reps. I think the future's bright, but look, I've been a Patriots fan my whole life, and watching these last 2 decades of wide receivers that they've drafted, I don't know. I need to see it before I get excited. But Kyle Williams should be in that starting lineup, right? Week 1, especially if Stefon Diggs is not ready to go. He is smaller, but he can play on the outside. I think he's a better slot guy, but you can move him around. He's very versatile. I think Josh McDaniels is going to have a good time playing with him, and I'm optimistic, but again, skeptical because of the Patriots draft history, and Elliott Wolf is still around, and he drafted Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, who we'll get to in just a second. Kyle Williams has also befriended Efton Chisholm. He's sticking around Foxborough, participating in some of the rookie practices that come after mandatory minicamp, and Efton Chisholm has really been the big talk of this offseason. Was not drafted, undrafted free agent out of Eastern Washington, the team with the ugly red turf. As I've said about Chisholm before, he's small, he's slow, but he's quick, he's tough, and has incredible hands. There's been a lot of comparisons between him and Julian Edelman, which the more I think about it, I don't think is really accurate. Julian Edelman, ran 0.2 of a second faster in his 40-yard dash than Efton Chisholm did. Far more athletic, was a mobile quarterback in college at Kent State. Efton Chisholm really isn't that guy. I think he's more of a Wes Welker, Danny Amendola type receiver, which I would take either of those guys in this Patriots receiving core. The real tell is going to be how does he perform in pads, right? If you're going based off of his performance in OTAs, then yeah, it would be stupid not to put Efton Chisholm on the roster. But like I said, he's not the fastest, even though he's very quick. He's got incredible hands, doesn't drop anything. I don't think he dropped a pass all of OTAs, all of minicamp. But he puts on those pads, gets pushed around once training camp rolls around. Then, there's a good chance he doesn't make the roster. That said, look, he was a highly productive wide receiver throughout college. Either broke or went right up against all of Cooper Kupp's college records. Very similar playing style to Cooper Kupp, who I know was a guy that we talked about the Patriots potentially bringing in this offseason. If you can get that type of guy with a young Efton Chisholm, then yeah, it's a home run. But I think he'll still be good when pads come on, just because he is such a tough player and plays bigger than he actually looks. But it's the NFL. It's a different ballgame than Eastern Washington University. He doesn't perform in training camp. He may not even be on the practice squad for all we know. But he stays the course, looks as good as he did in OTAs. Efton Chisholm will definitely have a spot on this roster and could be your next consistent Patriots receiver for years to come. And I really hope that happens. Speaking of consistency, Demario Douglas, the most secure wide receiver spot on the roster. I think he's going to have a huge year 3. Had quietly a pretty good year 2. Ended up in the Belichick doghouse his rookie year because he was stripped from behind in I think week 2 and then sat on the bench for a number of weeks. And then Belichick put him in there and he was one of Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi's best targets. And he was definitely, there were some chemistry issues at times, but he was definitely a reliable target for Drake May last year. We know Douglas, he's small. He's not going to be a vertical threat, but very fast, very quick. Your typical bread and butter slot receiver, and I'm really excited to see what Josh McDaniels can do with him. Now the 2 players that are on the trade block. Of course, you have Kendrick Bourne, a veteran, has worked with Josh McDaniels before, played very well with Josh McDaniels. and Mac Jones as his quarterback. Bourne's been through the turnover of offensive coordinators these last few years. Certainly coming off of an ACL injury from about a year and a half ago, you expect him to be 100%, but he is also up there in age, has a good reputation around the league. That's why I think the Patriots might consider dealing him. But I think if there's a guy they're going to ultimately deal, it would be Kayshon Boutte. We know Boutte was drafted after having a great start to his college career at LSU and then, struggling with the coaching, not getting the reps that he should, and Patriots took a chance on him. Belichick took a chance on him. Had plenty of playing time in week one, then didn't get 2 toes down, and then was in the Belichick doghouse. And then year 2 took a huge leap. Definitely Drake May's most reliable vertical target. And you'd think with his athleticism, his ceiling, he can take another leap in year 3. The issue with Kayshon Boutte is he's not the most coachable. He doesn't always line up in the right spot. There was visible frustration from Drake May at times, Kayshon Boutte not being in the correct spot. And it's only going to get more complex with Josh McDaniels' offense, with Drake May picking up McDaniels' offense and all the nuances and audibles that come with that. Kayshon Boutte might be a better fit for a team that, maybe has a more simplified West Coast type scheme that he played in last year with Alex Van Pelt. And that's why I think if the Patriots are to trade one of these guys, and I think they probably will, Kendrick Bourne and Kayshon Boutte, Boutte has more value because he is young, had a great year 2, has a ton of athleticism, high ceiling as I mentioned. Whereas Kendrick Bourne, he's in the final years of his career, and I also think there's value having a veteran receiver in that room, particularly if it doesn't work out with Stefon Diggs, and a guy that knows Josh McDaniels' offense and is going to be able to help the other receivers pick it up and work with their quarterback who's also learning it at the same time. I think Boutte's gone and Bourne stays, in my opinion, but it's also possible this is a very crowded room. Both of those guys could be gone. You might be able to get a 5th-round pick for Kayshon Boutte. I think Bourne, you're talking about a 6th or a 7th rounder at this point in his career. Maybe you can get a 4th for Boutte. I think he was drafted early in the 6th round, so you're flipping him after a couple of years. I kind of hope Boutte stays because I was really impressed with him last year, and maybe it can work out with him and McDaniels, but the red flags are already there, so we'll see how it ultimately plays out. Then there's Mac Hollins, a guy who nobody ever seems to talk about. Patriots picked him up in free agency. I was very excited about this move, but he was limited all spring due to an injury. He missed some practices due to personal reasons. I saw him as a lock to make the roster. He's certainly not a lock if he's not healthy, if he's not ready to go. I mean, if he is, he should make it. He is a low-volume receiver, but a high-value target. Certainly a guy that can line up on the outside. You can put him in the slot. Came up big in the AFC title game last year, playing with the Buffalo Bills at Arrowhead Stadium against the Chiefs. Had a huge touchdown deep down the field. He's a big play type receiver. Also a good, calm veteran presence. Walks around barefoot, really into the grounding thing. But he's a guy that the receivers can look up to. But again, this is a crowded room, and let's say it works out with Kyle Williams, and it works out with Efton Chisholm, and you still have Stefon Diggs there, Demario Douglas. There's not a lot of room for Mac Hollins, and that's the only reason I think if he's not healthy and ready to go, he could be cut. I don't see it happening. I would like to think he'll be ready to go come late July. I was really excited about the Mac Hollins pick, but this is the NFL, and he's been kind of a journeyman throughout his career, and it wouldn't be the end of the world for him. If he got cut by the Patriots, he'd find another spot on another team. But he does bring a unique set of skills that I don't think this receiving core has. So I hope he sticks around. I hope he stays healthy, and Mac Hollins gets some playing time this year. And last but not least, or maybe least, Javon Baker and Jalen Polk, our latest disappointments from the Patriots drafts. I don't think that's fair to Javon Baker, to be honest. I think Javon Baker was always going to be a project. I didn't see him getting a ton of playing time last season, and he didn't get a ton of playing time, at least until late in the year. I think he got his first catch in the garbage time game with Joe Milton in Week 18. And things are kind of looking up for Javon Baker, if I'm going to be honest. He had some huge highlight catches in the spring. The biggest one came when he separated from Christian Gonzalez on the sideline. Of course, that same play, he celebrated too long, started trash talking to the defense, didn't get back into the huddle in time, and then got screamed at by Mike Vrabel. So the highlights and OTAs also were paired with, some of the red flags that we've seen from Javon Baker in the past. Although I think he was fine last year. It was more coming out of University of Central Florida. But I do think there's a bit of a tough love thing going on between Mike Vrabel and Javon Baker, and he wants the kid to succeed, right? Because the talent is clearly there. We saw that in college. We know the ceiling is high for Javon Baker, and he got occasional reps with the starters during OTAs. Not during minicamp because everyone was there, but during OTAs, he got tons of reps, went up against Christian Gonzalez, and really held his own out there. So, Javon Baker, he has the potential to be this year's Kayshon Boutte if he makes the roster. Now, I think he could also be a practice squad guy. I don't think you're going to lose him if you put him on the practice squad. People are going to say, look, he's been in New England. He's in his second year. Didn't get any playing time last year. Still not getting any playing time. He's on the practice squad. We're not going to pluck him away because there's too much uncertainty. You can probably stash him there and then bring him up sometime in the season when another receiver goes down or when he's ready to go. I think you can get away with that with Javon Baker. I don't think you can get away with that with Jalen Polk. But unlike Baker, it's not really looking up for Jalen Polk at the moment. He has a shoulder injury, was limited in both OTAs and minicamp. There's reports that he's falling behind without having those consistent reps, contrary to Baker, who, again, is getting the tough love from Mike Vrabel, but Vrabel wants Javon Baker to be his little project, right, at receiver. He wants him to be the big success story coming into the season. Mike Vrabel was not there when the Patriots drafted Jalen Polk. He didn't draft Javon Baker either, but Baker has a little bit more uncertainty. Polk was a guy who was supposed to have dependable hands, be a guy ready to go week one, and he was never that guy. And at least from some of the clips we've seen from OTAs and minicamps, drop passes from the limited play that he had out there, I don't know. As I said before, I wouldn't be shocked if Polk goes and Baker stays. And Polk was an early round draft pick, right? If he gets cut by the Patriots, he'll get a shot somewhere else, whereas Javon Baker, I'm not sure is the case. And I think Baker has a significantly higher ceiling, as we talked about when they were drafted, than Polk. Polk was supposed to be high floor, low ceiling. It's low ceiling, low floor. I'd be shocked, to be honest, if he ultimately makes the roster. But, second round pick, maybe you keep him around for another year, see if it works out. But with this crowded receiving room, with Stefon Diggs added, with Kyle Williams added, potentially adding Efton Chisholm, potentially Matt Collins, you still have Demario Douglas, Javon Baker being in the mix. I just don't see a spot for a guy like Jalen Polk right now, unless he looks really good in training camp. Hey, he looked good in training camp last year, so maybe he can have a similar July and August and find his way into that lineup with better coaching. He can be consistent out there, but I'm not sure. I'd rather gamble on keeping Baker around than hoping it works out with Polk, who was, again, supposed to have a high floor and turned out to have a low floor as a rookie. But that's it for this episode of Patscast. Again, we're in the offseason lull right now, but we'll certainly be back with more Patriots coverage throughout the coming weeks. If you like this video, be sure to smash that like button on YouTube, subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, or subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and we'll see you very soon.